What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the doctor's office, where you get your proper diagnosis and prognosis in all things comic books, comic book characters. And today is just what the doctor ordered. I'm going to give you another comic book character, a black comic book character, and he goes by the name Tombstone. You might know him from the Spider-Man animated series if you did watch that, but he is one of the Spider-Man villains. So Alonzo, or Lonnie Lincoln, aka Tombstone, grew up in Harlem, New York, and he has albinism, which is the complete, just no pigment in his skin whatsoever, which made him an outcast among the kids in his class. He also had a problem with his vocal cords, which made him speak in whispers. So the only kid in his class who did not bully him was Joe Robertson, and he kind of misconstrued the lack of hostility towards him as friendship. And in order to overcome his bullies, he worked out continuously until he became a bully himself. Now, he used his muscles and his size at this point to extort money from the kids at school. And in his senior year, he had already been nicknamed Tombstone, and he found out that Joe Robertson was doing an expose on him and his activities through the school in the school paper. In order for him to make Joe drop the story because he felt betrayed and hurt by this, he assaulted Joe, and Joe decided not to do the story. 8 years later, Tombstone is now a mob enforcer in Philadelphia, where Joe Robertson also happens to work as a reporter. Tombstone ended up killing the mob boss, Ozzy Montoya, and it was witnessed by Ozzy's employee, Isidore Hipper. And Hipper decided to go to the newspaper to inform them of what just happened, where Robertson just so happened to work. Now, Robertson had made an appointment with Hipper to see him so that he could get all of the details for the story, but before he met up with Hipper, Tombstone killed Hipper, and when Robertson got to the meeting point, he saw Tombstone there, taunting him with Hipper's body. But because of his twisted perceived friendship with Robertson, Tombstone decided to let him go, but then taunted him on the phone at his apartment, which scared him into going back to New York, where he ended up being an acclaimed reporter for the Daily Bugle. Now, Tombstone continued to work as an enforcer, and he had been arrested several times, but between witnesses mysteriously disappearing or randomly recanting their story, he never actually went to jail. He did end up having a daughter, and he was actually a good father to her, amoral, but, a good dad. And he actually was very happy and proud to help her with her first scam, where she went to a girl's birthday party pretending to be the girl's best friend or whatever, and stole all of her gifts. Sounds like father and daughter duo to me. Anyway, so after she stole all the girl's gifts and further along into the relationship, Tombstone did end up paying her way through college, where he wanted her to be a financial lawyer so that they could both exploit the law. But she wanted to be a costumed supervillain and follow in her father's footsteps. And he was like, "What do you mean? Don't do that." But she did it anyway, and she became the Beetle. 20 years after Hipper's murder, Tombstone was hired by the arranger and moved back to New York. He ended up hiring a mutant named Roland Rayburn, who would later become known as the Persuader. Now, at some point in time, Robertson spotted Tombstone in the street and felt this overwhelming responsibility to try to bring Tombstone down. And he felt really bad about all of the murders that he essentially let Tombstone commit, even going back all the way to high school. So before personally confronting Tombstone, Robertson did sit down and tape a full confession with all of the evidence that would link Tombstone to all of these crimes, and he left it with his employee at the Daily Bugle, Peter Parker. Now, in the confrontation that happened between Robertson and Tombstone, Robertson did try to kill Tombstone with a gun, but Tombstone was wearing a bulletproof vest. And in this confrontation, with Tombstone still being incredibly strong, he grabbed Robbie's arms and squeezed them, and he almost ended up breaking Robbie's back, but he just left him crippled because he still had this twisted perceived notion that him and Robertson were somehow still friends. Now, Tombstone did find out that Peter Parker had the incriminating tape and threatened Peter Parker's wife at the time, Mary Jane Watson, to give him the tape, and he ended up summoning Peter to Atlanta to confront him about it. And Peter did go, but as Spider-Man. And he defeated Tombstone in Atlanta. And while all of that was happening, Robertson had called the Department of Justice to give the disposition on Tombstone. And after his defeat to Spider-Man, Tombstone was arrested and finally jailed. But in a twisted turn of events, so was Robertson, because he confided in the incriminating tape and all the evidence that he was an accessory to the murder of Hipper when he kind of just left and didn't call the cops. Now, they were both jailed at two completely different places, but using his influence, Tombstone made sure that he was transferred to the Lewisburg Federal Prison, where Robertson was jailed at, and made sure to get the cell next to his. However, he was not really able to bully or haunt Robertson the way that he wanted to, because Robertson was being protected by a criminal named Bruiser. Now, Bruiser had taken a liking to Robertson. I believe he was like his cellmate or a cross cell, whatever. And this actually ended up failing quite miserably, because they ended up being jumped by other inmates and Tombstone beat Bruiser to death. After Bruiser's death, Tombstone strong-armed Robertson into calling Spider-Man to lure him into a trap. They drugged him and used him as a hostage to stage a breakout, and Tombstone was essentially kidnapping Robertson and got them into a helicopter. Now, Spider-Man did cling to the helicopter, and before Tombstone really had a chance to kill Spider-Man, he was basically speared out of the helicopter by Robertson, and they landed in a river. Robertson was injured, and an Amish man had found the both of them, taken them back to his farm, and had them healed up, basically. Tombstone waited for weeks for Robertson to be completely healed so he could challenge him to a final fight, and this fight ended with Robertson stabbing Tombstone with a pitchfork. While the injury was not super serious, Tombstone was very hurt that his friend would try to kill him and simply walked away. He ended up getting back into Manhattan and started working for his new employer, Hammerhead. Now, Hammerhead did think that Robertson was a liability and a connection to Tombstone, so he hired a hobgoblin to get rid of him, and Tombstone was like, absolutely the hell not. And if anybody's going to kill him, it's going to be me. So he did stop that plan, and in the midst of them trying to kill Robertson and Tombstone trying to save Robertson and all kinds of things going on, he fell into a vat of chemicals which gave him indestructible skin. After that, he did try to take over Hammerhead's empire, kicking Hammerhead out of his own mansion, and he called Robertson there to basically thank him for giving him these newfound powers that he did enjoy. At some point in time, he was put into the game pit and put up against Taskmaster, but he ended up beating Taskmaster with like almost no problem. At one point, Tombstone was being hunted by Punisher while also being in conflict with a criminal named Deadzone, and he ended up being saved by Moon Knight so that the Punisher wouldn't get. He also at one point claimed to have killed Spider-Man because he came out of the East River holding Spider-Man's mask, but really that didn't happen. He ended up getting knocked out by both Black Cat and Spider-Man, and he went back to going to do a job as a bookie. Later on, he was also hunted by the Merc with the Mouth, Deadpool, who was assigned to kill him, but that didn't happen. And a friend of his named Conrad was escaping with Tombstone, but ended up being captured and thrown to Tombstone's hungry pigs. But he ended up being saved by Deadpool. Sometime later, he was hired by Doc Ock to kidnap the unborn child of Lily Hollister and Harry Osborn, thinking that the Goblin DNA would be able to save him. He succeeded in kidnapping the girl who was carrying the child, but Spider-Man did save her. Sometime later after that, he was confronted by Danny Rand and Luke Cage about a necklace that he had won in a card game against the Hood. He didn't want to tell them that. He wanted them to think something else, but then got mad when they assumed that he stole it. And because he didn't like Danny Rand in any way, shape, or form, things took a turn for the worse, and they got into a fight. When he finally did recover, he tried to warn them that the necklace was magical, but they weren't really listening. Now, when Kingpin became the mayor of New York, he assembled a lot of the crime bosses and criminals, with Tombstone being included in that. He He ended up putting a bounty on a villain named Boomerang who was hiding a piece of the lifeline tablet from him. Now, Tombstone found out that Boomerang was actually roommates with Robertson's son Randy and wanted to kill Randy to spite Robertson just for the hell of it. Now, when he gets to Randy's apartment, he sees Randy and his daughter Janice kissing because Janice has been seeing Randy secretly. And Joe Robertson finds this out at the same time, essentially, and they both try to persuade their kids to drop their relationship, but it was not happening. Robertson and Tombstone decided to put their differences aside when their kids were kidnapped by Crime Master and Madame Mask, and they were able to save them with the help of Spider-Man and Janice's evil villain group known as the Syndicate. After it was all said and done, they decided to call a truce and not let their grudge interfere with their children's relationship. So their truce involved anything pertaining to their children's relationship. After he got shot, he was in the hospital in a coma pretty much, and Spider-Man, who was under the influence of the Green Goblin's sins, had attempted to unplug the life support. Well, he attempted and succeeded in unplugging the life support. The hospital was able to resuscitate Tombstone and keep him alive, and he did end up surviving the attempt on his life. As for his abilities, he does have superhuman strength, agility, durability, and he is advanced in hand-to-hand combat. He also has the enhanced feature from the vat of chemicals, where his skin is nearly indestructible. The diagnosis. The problem with this character is it kind of just seemed like another angry black man trope. Because that's essentially what he is, and also having to delve into crime all the time. For this character, the way that they wrote it, he is a well-written character. I just don't think that that trope in its entirety was really necessary, but that is just me. He did come out, I believe, in '68, so I guess that was their norm for the time. The change over the years into where he's being saved by different heroes, or teaming up with Spider-Man, or, you know, speaking to Luke Cage, things like that, especially since him and Luke Cage are essentially from the same place. I think that those are really fun storylines, and they do well to contribute to his character. Prognosis, we haven't really seen Tombstone too much in the comic books. This time where he got shot and Peter attempted to assassinate him in the hospital is the last time we actually see him. I would actually love for them to do kind of a Thanos thing from when Thanos lost to Squirrel Girl, where he's just trying to raise his daughter, trying to get her out of being a costume villain, and just kind of enjoying life and actually building the friendship with Joe Robertson, because while they do have that truce in place when it comes to their kids, a friendship can be built out of that, and a twisted friendship for sure, but a friendship nonetheless. So, but that has been just what the doctor ordered, and thank you for coming to the doctor's office.